Hello everyone and welcome to our voyage. In our sailing vessel today, we are going to voyage into the unknown, also known as 1 Chronicles chapter 2. What will we find there? Buried treasure? The Fountain of Youth? No, free PDFs. Free PDFs for everyone. That's what you find at the end of the rainbow. And if you want those free PDFs, you can get them at tobelikechrist.com. And the PDF that you're seeing up on the screen is one of those. So check those out down. There's a link down in the description if you want to go there. And you can download now everything from Genesis to 2 Samuel, through 2 Samuel, Matthew, Luke, Acts, and James. So there you go. Treasure. As I mentioned in chapter 1, chapters 1 through 9 of 1 Chronicles are a list of genealogies, family trees, record of the descendants of important biblical families. Okay, so in chapter 1, we talked about we went all the way from Adam, the first man, to Isaac, who was Abraham's son. Isaac had two children, Jacob and Esau. We talked about Esau in the last chapter, but really Jacob, also known as Israel, is the one that we want to be focused in on. He's going to progress the story forward. God's going to fulfill his promises through Jacob. And so we'll pick up on Jacob's genealogy the first half of this chapter. We're also going to talk about a guy named Hezron and his children in the second half of the chapter. Noteworthy names that you'll find in this chapter include Jacob, or Israel, Joseph, Judah, Tamar, Achan, Boaz, David, Hezron, and Caleb. Now, the descendants of Jacob moved around quite a bit, at least in two major locations. Jacob and his children were originally in Canaan, but they moved to Egypt when there was a famine, and Joseph was the ruler of Egypt. You can read about that in the book of Genesis. Now, Egypt is not on the map, but if you basically go to the southwest of what we have on the map here, you'll run into Egypt. It's pretty easy to find on a world map. Now, they were down there in Egypt for several hundred years. They grew into a really large nation. Jacob's family got really big. They grew out of his 12 sons. They got bigger and bigger and bigger. You remember what happened to them? They became slaves in Egypt. That's how the story of Moses begins. God wants somebody to lead his people out of slavery in Egypt and lead them to the promised land, that land that God promised to give to Abraham. So that's what Moses did. He led them out of Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea, spent some time in the wilderness, and then they went up to Canaan. And under the leadership of Joshua, Moses' successor, the leader of the Israelites, they conquered the land of Canaan and the surrounding regions, and they made it their home. So if you look at the map, you'll see it's all kind of like portioned out into different shades of gray, and each of those has a name like Zebulun, Issachar, Benjamin, Judah, Simeon, Ephraim, Gad. Those are all the names of the tribes of Israel, the sons of Jacob, or just sons of Israel, who grew into these really large families, and then their families inherited portions of the promised land when they conquered it. So all the little gray areas are all the portions that they received. Hopefully that makes some sense. Now we'll go over to our outline section. You'll notice that it's pretty short because we are just trying to summarize a list of names, basically. The first section is verse 1 through 17, the genealogy of Jacob. 1 Chronicles 2 is a continuation of 1 Chronicles 1. 1 Chronicles 1 left off with Jacob's brother Esau. Now it's going to go and document Jacob's family, because as I mentioned, that's the family that we're really interested in. It picks up with Jacob, also known as Israel, who's Abraham's grandson and the son of Isaac. The genealogy names Jacob's 12 sons, who eventually are going to become the 12 patriarchs, the 12 fathers of the tribes of Israel, and then they're going to grow into a great nation, right? And that's what we were talking about in our map section. The family tree then continues through, well, basically it highlights one of those 12 sons. It highlights Judah, because it's through him that eventually King David is going to be born, and then eventually Jesus is going to be born into a family that were descended from David, Judah, Israel, Abraham. And as I'm covering this material, I realize that there's a lot here. There's a lot of people, a lot of names, there's a lot of backstory to this. And so if you don't get it all, right away, that's okay. The more you become familiar with the Bible, the more you'll start to put all these names and places and people together and how their stories fit together, right? And you'll get it. So don't worry, if it's somewhat confusing now. Just know that we're trying to track the family of Judah, the son of Jacob. Now section number 2, verses 18 through 55, the genealogy of Hezron and Caleb. So the genealogy doesn't end with David. There are some other family lines within the tribe of Judah that are recorded, including this one of this man named Hezron. Now, the documenting of these additional families would have been important to the people of Judah who were returning from the Babylonian exile. This is about 600 years after David. Would have allowed them to figure out who their descendants were even after they had been separated from their culture and their land and many of their customs for 50, 60, 70 years. And so that is 1 Chronicles chapter 2. Yeah, it's a little bit complicated. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to follow. I admit, even trying to summarize these, I'm trying to track the names and who goes where, and it can be pretty confusing. I think they get clearer the more and more you know about the Bible, but they're still hard. So that's chapter 2. Hang with us. We'll get through these genealogy chapters. Now for our application section. Don't you know I had a hard time coming up with applications for all of these genealogy chapters, but here's the one that I got for today. The genealogies in the Bible make it clear that the Bible is meant to be read as a real, genuine, historical record. The Israelite people were able to authenticate these genealogies, and they didn't see them as works of fiction. They didn't see these people who they claimed to be descended from as fairy tale characters, as mythological characters. No, they saw them as real people, and they tracked their heritage through these men. So these names represent real historical figures, and this fact is backed up by ever-growing amount of archaeological evidence that again and again and again, as time goes on, proves that the Bible has been giving us accurate historical information all along.